I'm excited today to have a proper panel. And guys, let's start off full on. Rene, you guys are not your traditional funder. Explain to me what it means when you're a non-traditional funder.
So I think there's, if you look at the funding environment and the funding arena, there's quite a number of players there. You have your traditional banks, and then you have your venture capitalists, and you have your equity, kind of private equity, and then you have somewhere in between business partners, and then you have also your private investors, and you have your more expensive short-term lenders and those bridging capital kind of, and what you maybe might call the loan, let's call, not call them the ugly word, but those guys that really provide that capital that you actually need tomorrow. So where business partners fits is somewhere in between, somewhere between a bank, your venture capitalists, your private equity investors, and then maybe also a little bit closer to the short-term funders as well. So somewhere in between. But what makes us different is specifically that we try and assist entrepreneurs who's not able to get funding through the traditional banks. They not necessarily have their own contribution requirements that the banks would require, or the security available, or they might not have a good credit record, or there's some business risk. So
you risk takers.
Risk takers. That's where we fit in. Yeah.
Lovely. Interesting space. I want to know more, but we'll come back. Glenda, I mean, FNB is an entrepreneurial bank. Yes. For as long as I've known it, that's where you guys have played. You've thrived in that space. What do you guys look for when you deal with funding? What do you want in entrepreneurs to give them that check?
Right. So, we look for sound businesses that know what they're doing, that have sort of run a course already into like startups, that has run its course and gets to a point where they're expanding, where there's a need for funding to grow the business. So, when we look at funding per se, it's for those businesses that have good corporate governance in place. There's transparency. The guys, they open about their financial statements. They've got good credit processes in place in terms of their debtors and creditors and their stock take, and they sound businesses. So we leverage off that type of business. There's different funding products that we provide them with depending on their life cycle, depending on what their need is, because that's core for us. What is your need? We don't just throw products at you. Is there a need, whether it be working capital, whether it be property finance, or even importing or exporting? There's trade facilities. So it really depends on what the business need is, where they are in their life cycle, and how we can basically assist them, build off it, grow the business. Sustainable cash flow is key for us. So there needs to be firm inflows, the firm client base. We need to see that business is scalable, and so we tap into that, and then we support them in the type of funding, and we match it, depending on what their need is. So it's an array of products we have for different client needs. So the businesses need to have, as I said, financial statements need to be sound, good profit growth. They need to have good corporate governance in place in terms of their staff structure, the ownership. We need to know exactly who we're getting into bed with. The ownership's key. And then, have good credit, history, references, things like that.
Glenda, you guys speak in big terms. You'll talk about LBOs, MBOs, yes, and fancy terms. I mean, for entrepreneurs, break it down. What do you guys do in deal making? Right. I need to understand, what is that?
Okay. So when we talk about an LBO, leverage buyout, businesses go through, there may be sort of one time in their lives where there's a buyout of sorts, where either the owners want to retire, or there's a need to acquire a complementary business, or they need to expand, or they want to recapitalize their balance sheets, things like that. So management buyouts is when we bring management in to assist the existing shareholders to exit. and we provide funding for that. We fund those transactions. So we provide term funding, whether it be 5-year term funding, depending on exactly what the cash flow can afford to repay it. And then the exiting partner can leave quite comfortably knowing he's got the cash in the bank, and the business then supports that transaction. So we fund into that, and we place our funding on the cash flows in the business to repay that debt. So whether it be, there's different structures as well. So whether it be an on-lend to the incoming shareholder, if they're doing sort of a subordinated debt structure, it's different. I won't go into the detail as such, but I mean, there's ways for guys to exit, there's ways for management to come in, and there's ways for the balance sheet to be sort of recapitalized. So we can take out debt that is potentially maybe high interest debt, and we'll put leverage finance term debt in there.
Right.
Right. So those are the things. There's different ways to sort of manage the leverage finance product, but also in terms of management, how they can also get their skin in the game and be part of the shareholding structure.
Right.
Yeah, and we've got a nice internal team as well that does our legals for us. So that's also sorted, and then admin support. So we've got a sound leverage finance team within FNB.
Amazing. So now we've heard from the funders. I want to take it to a man that started a business as an entrepreneur, because typically when we have these conversations, entrepreneurs have their own little quarrel in a corner. Oh, we don't get funded, we don't get this. Funders like, oh, these guys are not ready, they don't have. So I've made sure we've got both on the panel so we can have the real conversation. Loyiso, take us back when you started your business. Did you go for funding first? What did you do? Because we need to understand the real story. I don't want the fluff. I want the real story. I don't want started, then I had a farm, then no. I want to know, I had $1,000. Where did you get that $1,000 from?
And don't hold back.
And give us the real story. So take us back there and tell us exactly how did you fund your business?
Thanks, Pat, and hi, ladies. I think today I'll identify as a lady because you don't have a lot of questions. And this is Cape Town. I think we're quite flexible at that. So we started, just a bit brief about us. I own the first black-owned brand of extra virgin olive oil in South Africa. We started in our garage in Grassy Park, 2019 December. We've won an international award in the World New York Olive Oil Competition, where we were competing against the best in Italy, Spain, and France, and we won gold. Last year we won silver. So we represent what a lot of people like our stalwarts Nelson Mandela fought for, is access to these markets. But access to markets is nothing without access to capital and resource. So to go to where your question. So between 2017 and 2019, I was working in the Access Park, in direct access, for a call center. And for 2 years, we tried to get a farm in Prince Albert. And the farmer, old man, he wants out his kids, just like most Afrikaans farmers. The kids are in Europe, they are all over the world. And they don't want to continue the farming, which is a narrative that we know. And Vili really wanted me to get this thing, and we worked with PIC. We went all over and we couldn't get funding. Long story short, I say to Vili, listen, after 2 years, I say, Vili, I still believe in this dream of having in my brand called Ubuntu. I want an African brand. We're tired of the grandmothers and the dogs and the little olive plant. We want something beautiful and attractive. And after 2 years of failing and traveling for about 6 hours to Prince Albert, I said to Vili in 2019 December, listen, mate, I'm not going to give up on this thing. And Vili and I at that time were quite good friends. And my start was, I said, Vili, back me, bro. And Vili said, listen, Loyiso, go to Jan de Kok for your labels, go to Console for your bottles, go to so-and-so for your caps. And he gave me about 1,000 liters of olive oil, which is about 2,000. We've got a 500 ml bottle, we'll see at the back. And that was a stock with about 200,000 rand. In December, when we launched, and it was a great time because we just won the There was a huge Black Lives Matter thing. So there was quite a lot of support around small and local. And we launched in 2019, December, registered an Instagram account, a LinkedIn account, a Twitter account, and all those accounts, and we pushed this thing, bro. And we sold about 800 bottles in that particular month. And from then onwards, we moved. So it was through Grace, a mentor who'd become a friend who was about the transformation agenda. I couldn't approach a bank. I had a great idea, but what are your financials? How's your last 6 months been? You just registered a bank mate 6 months ago. So we couldn't qualify from that end. But I think they always call it friends, fools, and family. I think is always a great start. And that's where we started. And from then onwards, we started becoming attractive. We could now all of a sudden, we did about 350,000 Rand by March of that year. And that was 3 months into our launch and a month into COVID, which is a perfect time to start a business. But it was amazing because at the center of my business thinking was I wanted to develop a product unlike shoes, unlike a phone that you buy once a year, but how do I go into a consumer space, not a service space, which is sometimes oversaturated, but how do I create a product that is a health product, that speaks to people needing it every day and speaking to its benefits of reducing high blood pressure, diabetes, and so forth and so forth and so forth. So that's how we started.
Amazing. Absolutely amazing. And did you guys give Willie some shares in the company?
So Willie ended up sadly selling his farm. But Willie and I still...
So you didn't get the farm?
No, we didn't get the farm. We're in a process now, God willingly, with Land Bank of buying one. But yeah, Willie and I are still quite close.
But what did you underestimate in that process of 2 years trying to raise funding? What you know now versus looking at that journey, what did you underestimate of you actually landing funding?
I underestimated, because I think the problem with us entrepreneurs is that we get so excited over our products and the service that we provide that we can't step outside of it. And I never had that wisdom. And stepping outside of it and saying, no, actually, Loyiso, you're not as handsome as you look, mate. Zip up a bit. You look a bit chubby, mate. So, and this is what our fund is looking for. And sometimes we overhype our passion and we over-exaggerate our importance. But when we need to now go source water from the tap, it's not coming out because of readiness. So I think at times I think I love marketing, and I think I over exaggerated the importance of getting my product out there. And now we're stuck with the demand because now you've got people excited about a great product, a South African proudliest local product, but now you don't have supply because, that grace that you were given of 1,000 liters
not there anymore.
Is not there anymore. But now how do you, and now you haven't built enough credit. You're not making 50,000 Rand a month, which most institutions want you. So I think what I overlooked was getting in shape and getting fit so that I can meet these guys.
So Rene, that's actually a nice segue here. Just listening to Loyiso's story, what resonates with you and how many times have you heard and seen this, that someone walks into your room and says, I've got this great idea. I'm going to put someone on the moon. How many times have you heard?
If I can give you 100 Rand for all the times I've heard it, I can...
Please, I'll be a millionaire. I can retire.
Be a very rich guy. But I think just listening to Loyiso, I think that is what every day that take me to the office is that really passion of entrepreneurs. And that is so important for entrepreneurs to keep that passion and not let that go away just because they are struggling to get funding or they have some obstacles or whatever they have. So Loyiso, it's an amazing story and actually it's so inspiring. I had goosebumps when I listened to you, and that again I said, well, I'm going to do this. This is what I want to do. This is who we will fund. But I think what he mentioned, what is very important, is the fact that the expectations of the entrepreneur versus the expectations of the funders are completely different. So that's exactly for the, and first of all, you should never let your passion go, because then you will not, but you have to be realistic, and you have to understand the reason why banks, investors, financiers are not always able to assist you at a specific stage in your business, because you might not be institutional ready. And that's why you have to go to that friends and fools and family and whoever can assist you, and maybe turn that 100 Rand around 10 times. It's because institutions see it from a different perspective. If I look at business partners and I look at our logo, I think that that's exactly what we try to say through that, is to say the entrepreneur is that square peg that doesn't fit into this round hole. And business partners or any financial institutions work in round holes, so it has to fit. And that's unfortunately where the gap is. The gap is how to be able for that square peg to in some way fit into that round hole, so that the investor can also believe in you, but also protect the risk that we have, because it doesn't help if we put all the money out there and in the end we have to write it off. So I think your story is so valid, and I hear it so often, and people are getting so frustrated not having access to funding, not understanding what they have to put in place to get to funding ready for a funder, and they don't necessarily know how to, because they just see their passion and their product, and they do all the right things in terms of the emotions and getting it out there, but they don't understand the systems and the procedures that they have to have in place to be ready for that funder, to be able to look at and to immediately buy into your passion, but also
with a sound mind.
With a sound mind.
So Rene, sorry to interject. What are those? What are you looking for beyond my passion and excitement? And I've got a farm. What do you want? What do I have? Which boxes do I have to tick? Let's get straight into what do you want? Do you want 3-year financials? What do you want from me?
I first of all want to tick that passion. So for me, if the entrepreneur is the most important person, or the most important, let's call it person in that whole business concept, because we know that if it's not if it's a good jockey, you can take any business and any horse to run. But if it's not a good jockey, the best horse will not win. So it's so important to make sure that's the right person, and therefore you have to have that. But you have to have also a few other things that, like for instance, make sure that all the boxes are ticked, which is that you have financial statements if you are an existing business, and audited financial statements. And I think you will appreciate that.
We've got friends that are auditors. We're best friends with them. Sometimes they also irritate me, but we're friends with them. We know a guy.
They are very important in the lives of financiers, but also in the lives of entrepreneurs. And then furthermore, your business plan. I see it so often that people, they try to just run with it. They get frustrated because entrepreneurs needs to they have to make a decision immediately on the spot, and which is very valid. But unfortunately, it doesn't work in the life of a financier. It doesn't work that way. So unfortunately, you have to get your plan ready. If you don't know where you're going and you don't know what's going on, what frustrates me really is that entrepreneurs don't understand what's going on in their bank accounts. They don't manage their own money. So often entrepreneurs will get to business partners and tell them, oh, you know what, I have a source issue because my auditor or my accountant
it's always
didn't
us.
pay it over. It's always the accountants. They always tell you that's the accountants who didn't look after them. And they didn't do whatever they should have done. And I think to myself, but why do you place it in their hands? Why don't you know what's going on in your business? Because it's so important. You can work with a lot of things if all the financial information are available, if all your business plan is ready, if you paid your taxes, if you know where you're heading, if you have the contracts in place, if everything is in writing. I think that is so important for all financiers because then we know who we're dealing with. So yeah, that's from that perspective, there's quite a number of boxes to tick.
Sure. Amazing. Glenda, I mean, just listening to Loyiso's story there. If Loyiso had come to FNB back then, I predict the answer would have been no. You wouldn't have funded that. What were you going to look for? I mean, Loyiso, no offense, but they were not going to fund it. It's not going to happen.
No, we're going to get into bed together now because I'm fundable now.
I want to understand. How would you have actually looked at that transaction at that point in time? Because there was actually a buyout that was going to happen there, but Loyiso, effectively, you were a startup. That's the fact. You actually had no revenue traction. You had an idea. The funders started saying, but what if you don't even sell a single bottle?
Yeah, no, for sure. So yeah, to your point, so it would effectively be a startup, and that needs equity. It's not a debt funding, position that he's in. So, once the equity comes into play and you've actually proven that your product's moving, and then you can get sort of vanilla bank funding to grow from there on, So then we would look at, okay, fine, you've proven yourself now, there's equity, we can leverage off that equity. And then, we'd look at, clearly there's a working capital need here. So you have a product, you have a client, can we then bridge that first? So we look at that working capital need and put, whether it be, I don't know, if there's a debtors list that you've got at whoever your client is in the vanilla space, we could do data finance for you, or we can grow in that respect. So you've got constant working capital to grow. Then you may need a piece of equipment to take it to the next level, And then there's a trend. You've got positive cash flow, So that's how you would view it to enable you to grow from the starting blocks to get to where you are right now. So as a normal sort of banker, there's those type of sustainable cash flow needs, sound margins that we look at. We don't want to overgear either. So we make sure that there's a bit of equity before we put debt funding in. So that's how we sort of view funding in that respect, And if there's any sort of trade facilities, like if you're going to export your product, then we'd assist with that, where you don't necessarily have to put funds in, but you've got a product that we can leverage off,
Glenda, I like that, but can you tell our entrepreneurs in the room that actually you guys have policies to say you can fund here, you can't? Because I think a lot of people don't know. We go to a bank and we're like, oh, but these guys want to fund me.
Yeah.
But there's actually rules there's proper GRCs in place to say, listen,
No, for sure.
This is the limit. If you want a bond, you have to work. There's a limit, 30%. So maybe just explain that part, because I don't think entrepreneurs know that we would love to fund you, but unfortunately the rules preclude us from funding.
No, for sure. Because we obviously, it's your money that we giving to somebody else for their business, So we need to look at that aspect. We've got mandates that we work toward. So, if there's an equity need, you need equity funding. If there's a debt need, then we come into play here, So we can't just, we always ask ourselves, would you put your money in this business? If we can answer that question comfortably to say, you know what, he's got this idea, he needs to do this, let me put R1 million right into it. Who knows if you're going to sell your product, or you know what I'm saying? Yeah. So we always ask ourselves the question, because we're not dealing with our own money, it's our clients' money that needs to carry us. And obviously that's how banks make money as well. So there's strict protocols in that respect. We need to make sure that the financials are audited or reviewed, that, we don't, get into a position whereby we're accused of reckless lending, because we have to conform to that scenario as well. So if, we can't just go in there and put funds down if, it is actually reckless, and, you can sue us and say, no, but you knew, it was just pie in the sky product, that type of thing. So, there's angles to look at. But we are governed, and we need to just stick to our policies.
Right. So here's now what's quite interesting is that we watch guys from Silicon Valley. We watch guys that come up with, open AI. Now everyone's chat GPTing. But no one talks about chat GPT was given billions and billions pre-revenue, pre the great stuff, this is going to work. How do you feel about that, being an entrepreneur, looking at, because someone might say South African funding side of things is very conservative. In the US, you would have been funded with no revenue. You would have had that farm from day one. Do you think we sensationalize entrepreneurship in South Africa? And I'm getting deeper now.
Yeah, so I'm not a big fan of the Americans, but I won't lie. I love the American approach to business. Because our approach here to business is, okay, Loyiso, you need funding, give us your financials, give us this, your history, your track record, blah, 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 the bottom line, right? But the Americans' view is different. The Americans value failure. The Americans want to know, like a friend of mine had visited Silicon Valley about like 4 years ago, 3 years ago, and he says in China, the guys there talk about how attractive meeting Loyisos who have failed 4 or 5 times, because the idea is that these people have learned lessons, right? So I like that approach also. So it wouldn't work here. I think there would be a negative perspective on that here. But what I also love about the American approach is we've got the bottom line approach, they've got the top line approach, which says, bro, you are sitting in this corner selling 10 tomatoes. There's clearly a market here. How do we scale you? How do we make you sell in the whole of Cape Town? How do we make this business of yours? Loyiso, you are selling 100 bottles of olive oil. We know for the fact that you've got sweat capital, you drove 9,000 kilometers throughout the country, pushing your brand during COVID, blah, blah, and you risked your life. So we've got the sweat capital. You've got this, the passion, blah, blah, blah. We've got that. And we trust that a lot because we're not going to helicopter you, mate. But we expect you to move with it. But how do we move you, Loyiso, from selling 100 bottles a month to selling 100,000 bottles a month? How do we as the investors come on board and have some form of equity, because now equity now also commits the investor. And I've met a lot of guys that say, Loyiso, Chief, we've got 5 million. In Joburg, your friends in Joburg. Your comrades in Joburg. Loyiso, we've got 5 million. And in my desperation, they say, hey, Loyiso, we've got 5 million. We want 41% equity in your business. You've worked so hard and they want 41% of your business, right? But I would have loved a partner who says, listen, mate, I've got contacts at Checkers. These are our partners, or partner with business partners or FNB. And FNB says, listen, these are our strategic partners. We're banking with Checkers and ShopRite. Let's speak to the guys there. Or someone comes to me and says, listen, Sean Charlie says, listen, Loyiso, we've got 5 million. We've got a market in East Africa. We want 30% of that business. Let's work, but have a value add to it. So to come to your question is that I appreciate and I love the American top front approach, which says, how do we best capacitate you? How do we get into your business and be part of it? And after 5 years, with the equity, 20% equity that we are putting in, quarterly you will report to us. We're not going to helicopter you, but if you need assistance, come to us. But after 4 years, you work it off and you get your own company back. Because that's also a big fear that I had, is giving away so much equity after suffering so long with this business. And I think also, I do want to add this component that I had quite a lot of anxiety with banks in the private sector. Because
Okay, let's unpack that. We've got FNB here. This can be a therapy session. We can open up. It's a safe space.
Is this a safe space?
We can fix that.
So and I've always leaned, and I think my biggest problem also was, I think not backing myself initially, because if I had created a good track record for 2 years, I would be appealable to these ladies and their institutions. But also, you've got this idea that, if I don't pay back that loan, these guys are going to take my house and my wife.
And your kidney.
Yeah, and my kidney. So I relied for the longest time with government institutions because I'm safer with government. And I've defaulted. Sean knows I defaulted with SIFA. I mean, we had 2-3 years when we were out of business because there was a global shortage of olive oil in the country and in the world, actually. And that's why in 2023, 24, there was the olive oil prices skyrocketed because there was no olive oil. The olive oil trees could not take the rate at which global warming was happening at. So my supplier, who was supplying me, who was harvesting 100,000 liters of olive oil, example, only harvested 10,000 liters. And the guy turns back and he says, Loyiso, and I say, hey, Jan, I need olive oil, bro. And he says, listen, Loyiso, I only have, I said, 10,000 liters. This is not even enough for checkers. And I've got Woolworths saying, Mr. Manga, you remember, Mos, you are
Sign an
with
agreement.
us. Yes, you signed an agreement with us, and but they've kept me on because they enjoy my PE points. So, so yeah. I think just to shorten it, I can get carried away. There is an anxiety, and I think when I speak to my entrepreneurial friends also, there is this concept that I'd rather wait for government for a year than to apply to a private institution. They'll get back with me within 2 weeks. But I think we also need to graduate from that, because if you really think you are the man that you think you are, I think this is what I would have said to Loyiso 2 years ago. That if you think you are who you think you are, and you've got, you are listed with Woolworths, why don't you use those OTPs? Now, well, gratefully now, 2 months ago, we got listed with Checkers, which is a game changer.
Amazing.
So I think that's also the dichotomy that we face, and I speak from entrepreneurs, people of color that I mingle around, is that we don't want to lose the little that we don't have, right? Because banks can be brutal, and banks need to get their money back. So there's no entitlement around that. But with government, we can say, hey, government. Then it's like our taxpayers' money, But anyway, yeah, I hope I try to at least.
Glenda, are you guys that brutal? I mean, maybe just demystify that. And I know, Rene, you guys work differently, and there's a way. I mean, after that, can you just also tell us exactly how does business partners work in those instances? But Rene, do you take kidneys?
These but dogs.
Oh, dogs.
Yeah, but to your point, you said that, what if things don't go well, they take my wife and my dog and everything, Even you had some reservation at that point. You don't want to lose anything. You know what I'm saying? So that's where, we come in, we say, listen, how sound is it? We need to do sound lending, If there's any risk, we price for risk, and we take collateral in areas that, So, I mean, in the absence of a sound business case, in the absence of collateral, in the absence of entrepreneurs that have actually proven themselves, there's a gap there. We cannot just put debt funding in that scenario,
And on your end, business partners, how do you guys do it? I know, I've spoken to the guys up in Joburg. You guys have some fancy ways of doing it, because you're not a bank. It's your own money, as you guys say. So how do you work? Can they come and have a little bit of a cry session, and do you make a plan?
In our country, when we look at an application and we see this person being sequestrated before, immediately we have our reservations. Immediately we think, oops, we have to be careful here. We don't see it as school fees, the learning curve that they had. From that perspective, I think we're far more negative around that. But let's, for instance, and that's maybe also the difference, is if you go into the venture capital space and where you really just believe in that dream, and you see Loyiso and his dream and everything, like Willie did, because I think Willie realized you have the dream, but he worked with you for quite a number of years, and he knew you, and he was in you. He was in that business as well. And I think that is the difference, because in the venture capital arena, you have to, so you see the dream, and then what they will do is they really will become involved, and they will help the entrepreneurs through the process. But if you have the mandate, like business partners or the banks, to really increase footprint, to actually assist more entrepreneurs, you cannot spend that time with the entrepreneur to take him through all the ropes and make sure he doesn't make mistakes. But now you ask me to get back to your questions, how we're looking from this different perspective. Now, obviously, when we said we risk takers, so some kind of risk, business risk.
So you won't take
risk.
the kidney and the wife, you'll just take the kidney.
Maybe just the kidney. I said the dog, goodbye. But yeah, so we won't take everything. But so first of all, I think we try to really assist the entrepreneur to make a transaction that works for that business. So we are a bit more flexible than the banks. And as I said in the beginning, the funding arena, there's a space for everybody, for all funders as well. So it's not competition, it's for all funders. However, we have to take risks, and we have to be prepared to live with that risk that you take. So obviously, when we do a transaction and we price it accordingly, so if there's risk, we want to reward. Therefore, you cannot compare our pricing model with the banks or any of the financial institutions where they are well secured. And I think with the banks, well, as soon as they are not that well secured, their pricing model is also different. So for the entrepreneur, we take risks. We sometimes have to live with that risk that we've taken, and we have to live it out and so go through that whole process. I can actually speak about a specific situation where I was, I think, in business partners, the one who had to sit with a rear case for over 15 years before we could really resolve it. Because the entrepreneur also worked with us all the time. We're really trying to resolve the matter in a way where the entrepreneur, we won't lose the money, but also not the entrepreneur necessarily. And it took us really a long time, and in the end, we could resolve that matter. But it was a case where the financial risk was quite high. Later on, there was no business at all, but all the time the entrepreneur was working with us, and we took it through the process. But obviously, when there's the nice beach house in Hermanus available, I will also foreclose immediately because you really want to take your money and run, That's the situation. So it's a scenario of what do you have as security? But we often find as entrepreneurs not having 100% security in their particular business. And again, if the entrepreneur is willing to work with us, we will go through that and we will make plans. So in many cases, our rear ratios look completely different from what the banks will look at. But obviously, we will have to keep it within in certain ratios. Otherwise, business partners will close in the end. So, but again, I think that is always to be there, make a plan, see how you can assist. Maybe look at something where you can bring another partner. Maybe speak to the auditors, also get them involved, see how they can assist, look at the financials, restructure the balance sheet or something like that. So there's quite a lot of avenues, but that takes time, effort, and obviously a willingness from the entrepreneur as well as the funder.
Spot on.
Work together in the end to get to that solution.
And Loyiso, you mentioned that you got funded by government. And typically what I heard from that and listening to exactly our business partners, how did you work that relationship? Because effectively you were owing the money. So take us through the other side, because when you're not repaying the loan, how are you feeling? Are you happy that you're not repaying?
No, those calls piss me off. People call every day. That's quite a big thing. So I think also the one thing, I know that there's quite a bad rap on government at the moment, but I praise what those guys are doing. In this sense that because my credit wasn't looking that great, and I had issues with not paying Sean there at SIFA. I had an issue with FNB also. So
This is a good therapy session.
So I'm very kind with FNB. I don't want to, but I would not be where I am today. In the sense that now we've literally, I told you about this. We have now got a bottling facility, the first black-owned in the country, our own bottling line, stainless steel tanks. It's amazing. I mean, we've got assets now with 4.8 million. Now, when I was applying for that, government saw the red flag, and they were like, this is the people that we're dealing with, young people under 35 who are in the main people of color, do not have assets. They do not have all of these things that we want. And a lot of people like Loyiso's have got bad credit everywhere, but that's not going to stop government from funding. So I think that's the grace that government offers, and I'm quite grateful for that, because I literally wouldn't be here. We are applying now for a farm in Tubach, 20-hectare farm, beautiful farm, agro-processing the works, for 12, 13 million rand. The land bank is accepting, they should be sitting next week. I could possibly get that farm with this bad credit that would not even be considered from the private sector. So I think that those leeways and many others do sort of make these things happen. And I think just to add another point to what the ladies were saying, and I think something that FNB is doing quite well, because they are in the financial sector, in the banking sector, I think they've got some great initiatives, is that we sometimes talk about the gap between, or bridging the gap between entrepreneurs and compliance and getting this annual financials, data readiness, fitness and whatever. But I think what makes that relationship somewhat better, and is something that we overlook at times, and they are doing well, and I see that on your board, you guys have got it also, is a mentorship perspective. Towards entrepreneurship, I think a lot of us forget that this thing is lonely. This thing is lonely. I mean, I got divorced because I followed this. My wife hated what I did, and I chose this over everything. So I think a lot of us entrepreneurs have got these things where you'll be sitting with your friends, you're watching rugby, having a couple of beers, and you're just like, hey, I've got this idea, and you guys are just like, so what's the score? And fuck, so I think having sessions like this and meeting other entrepreneurs, you sort of hear and understand, hey, no, but what I'm going through seems like it's quite normal.
It's
here,
normal.
you know, and the excitement that you share. And I'm now so obsessed. I mean, I haven't had a mentor as the SAP Foundation I was part of, and that was the first time I had.
Tell us about that SAB Tolwana ESD
that was
program.
a game changer.
Right.
So the SAP, I don't know if I'm describing it properly, the SAP Foundation is an arm of SA Breweries, and they have got an entrepreneurship that speaks to developing entrepreneurs. My first PO with Woolworths was funded through them at my time of being unattractive to a lot of people. So yeah, so they give you a mentor, and I think I learned quite a lot of things there, because I thought I was great at what we do. And I think in our little islands, you know, you are the bull in the crowd there, you know, everyone else. And a simple question was asked there that completely messed my mind up. So one of the ladies who runs the Tolwana program was like, so Loyiso, what are your goals and what are your company's goals? And I was like, what? Do these things not exist together? Like, I couldn't separate myself to the business. And I think at times we burn out chasing this deer, chasing, and having little victories, that you just burn out. You just like, you just collapse. You start drinking, you start doing all these things, and you just, you know, so I think the mentorship is quite important. And a lot of us, I mean, I was having this discussion with a friend of mine, and I was saying, you know what, because I own the first black-owned brand of olive oil, I can't speak to Xhosa people about this thing. I can't speak about this in my language.
Because no one gets it.
Because the generation before us didn't have that opportunity. But I also don't have mentors in the Western Cape, in the agri space, you know, that are doing this thing. I mean, there are lots of potato farmers and cabbage farmers, but we want to be in the high value crops. We want to be part of this, pie of high value crops, blueberries, table grapes, and all of these brilliant things that are happening, because we don't want to be ordinary, and we want to be men that are remembered after 300 years. That, you know, they mention Nelson Mandela, they mention Siya Kolisi, they mention
Loyiso.
They mention also Manga. You know, those are some of the things that we sacrifice and we do now. So my point is this, that mentorship is quite a key element, and the ESD programs that FNB is pushing, and I've heard a couple of mates of mine that speak about the ESD programs, they speak about the export programs that you guys are doing with the wine ladies is quite phenomenal. So, and I see you got mentorship and technical assistance, because that thing sobers you up when someone says, mate, calm down.
And that's quite
bit
nice.
sober,
I
yeah.
like that part, because if it be maybe tell us, I know we've seen something on the social medias about 18-month program that you guys will just launch with Age Growth. Please tell us about that. And then also, Rene, on your end, I know you guys have the Basadi Women Fund. Please tell us about that.
So that's been running, because digital is the way to go in businesses now. You need to be on top of your game. You need to be in front. You need to be, in the market. And so they felt that, they needed to, is there echo or is it me? Yeah, that they needed to, get that out there, assist, like Loyiso said, assist entrepreneurs, with that mentoring, with workshops, with doing toolkits for them. And it just helps them to be able to manage cash flow well. There's the FNB accounting program as well, the instant accounting, and the point of sale, So you've got real-time sight of your cash flow. You can basically manage your projections, your business, you're on top of your cash flow constantly. And I mean, and unless you've got, the mentoring and you're able to know exactly, what the need is, you're going to get lost somewhere along the way. Your cash is going to take a loop. And I think in that respect, they have done that pretty well, with their workshops that they're running. So just to keep on track with, on the FNB website, exactly what's happening at any point in time. That's an 18-month, but there's a 2-year accelerator program, there's an advancer program. So there's quite a few, out there for the SMEs to be able to leverage off and be able to, take their business to the next level using these tools that's available to them.
Brilliant. Rene, on your end?
I'm going to touch on the Basadi Women's Growth Fund, but remind me to talk about the technical assistance.
I will, because that's why we're here. That technical assist is an arranged marriage that started in Joburg. That's now, we've got a blended family, but we'll get to it just now.
But maybe just on the Basadi Women Growth Fund that we recently launched. And maybe when Loyiso spoke, I thought to myself, but to actually help entrepreneurs, especially when they are in a phase where they're not 100% institutional ready, it's to actually launch more of these kind of funds where you put money aside and you say 100 million, you put aside, this is to assist these kind of entrepreneurs. You have to put down a slightly different hat as a financial institution to assist these entrepreneurs and to get them ready to really be institutional ready in the end and to grow their businesses. So what we have done then with Basadi is exactly that. We've set money aside, 90 million that we've set aside, and we said it's for women empowerment. Wow. Because if you look at the stats of entrepreneurs and of female entrepreneurs, they will give you some specific stats. And we all know that access to funding is for most entrepreneurs a very difficult thing, but even more so for women. And that's very much due to cultural differences and traditional ways of operating for females in the marketplace. And usually female entrepreneurs start their businesses for a slightly different reason than what a male entrepreneur will start his business for. Female entrepreneurs will really start that to support their family and to give them just at least an income and a livelihood out there. And for that reason, the type of business that they also usually start is more service orientated. There's not a lot of assets. They also haven't included the assets in their personal capacity due to the fact that from the traditional and cultural ways of operating in households, it was usually when they buy a house, it will be in the husband's name, or if they buy any other assets, it will mostly be in that. So usually you will sit with an entrepreneur or a female entrepreneur and suddenly I ask for a personal balance sheet.
There's nothing.
There's basically nothing
Yeah.
in there. It might be the few, household goods, which is the furniture and fittings, and maybe a car, but there's also a finance of that specific car, a vehicle. And then you say, well, how do I back an entrepreneur with basically nothing in your personal balance sheet? Because immediately when you ask me, what do I look at? I will tell you, I'm looking at your personal balance sheet because that tells me a story about you. And now I have this entrepreneur, but she has nothing on her personal balance sheet. They're married out of community of property. When they're in community, I can at least count it because they
Wiggle something.
But
Yeah.
the more nothing. So how does she get access to funding? She started with 100 grand with our first female entrepreneur that we funded. She started a business with 14 rand in a pay. 14 rand. And that's how she started. And she will tell you how she walked the streets to literally start this business. It's an amazing, amazing story. But if you look at the equity in the business, it's also fairly low. It's really just a little bit of retained income that she has built over the years. So how do I back an entrepreneur giving her funding, no security? So first of all, if I ever looked at something like that, I would have priced it really
Extremely hard. Yeah.
So then I won't do it because the business won't be viable. So in the end, I cannot do the transaction. But if you put money aside and you immediately, and I remember the first few deals for us sits on quorums and credit committees, we had to put on a different hat, and
It's uncomfortable. Yeah.
because suddenly you look at this and you think, Chevy, this is really risky. If this business fails, we lose the money. But if you put this money aside and say, well, I put this 90 million aside, and I really encourage women to grow their businesses. And he has specific criteria, obviously, saying that, first of all, it should be 100% owned female business. We really try and make sure that we do assist those entrepreneurs who will not get funding through the traditional ways or through the through business partners as such. If you applied through me and I could easily give you money, even if it doesn't matter which gender, then you are qualified for that. And the same with the bank. So we specifically look at that entrepreneur. But also, you will see these businesses where they start from really nothing. They've grown the businesses over the past few years, 2-3 years, and then and the business, they suddenly lands on these contracts that maybe like what Loyiso is now signing with Checkers in as well, and the same with these female entrepreneurs. But still, there's no way that they can get access to funding, and that's why we started that specific. And I think the other thing that female entrepreneurs really need is also access to networks.
Yeah.
We do operate slightly different from men in our way of dealing and what we would like to talk about. So definitely that, and then mentorship, which brings me to that specific technical assistance fund that we have, and that we have for all our clients. So as soon as you become a client of business partners, you will have access to this funding. And through this funding, we can finance anything for your business in terms of assisting your business. So meaning that if you need a zero accounting program to the software, we can help you. We can finance you that, and we can even help you to install that and to get your staff trained on that. Marketing plan, we can help you with that. A mentorship. If your business has to be ISO compliant, then we will fund those kind of things. Usually those kind of things that you would not get funding in any place. So we can assist you. And on that specific technical assistance fund, it's then 0% interest. Now I call it out there because business partners, I had to sell funding, expensive funding for quite a number of years. So to tell entrepreneurs that I can really assist you doing that portion of the funding for 0%, I think that gives me a lot of pride in what we are doing. But what we do is you will qualify for 15% of the total funding that we put into your business, to the maximum of 300,000 or 250 to 300,000 for that particular need of your technical assistance. And the Saudi, we start from 200 to 50,000 on that specific one, and we limited that one to 5 million. Usually business partners will be from 500,000 to 50 million. But this one, we limited that because we keep it within that, really assisting those women, and we price it at the prime of anything from +10.5 to 5.5, depending on the risk that we take in those particular transactions. And I have to say, this fund is really getting good traction at the moment. We can see really the benefit that female entrepreneurs see through that. And I realized this morning we need more of these funding, putting money aside so you don't pull the money away, that you are prepared to take risks with this amount of money, and then really give them those entrepreneurs an opportunity to grow their businesses and to really get their businesses into the market.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Ladies and gentlemen, if you've got a dog, if you've got a kidney, please do bring it across. We've got some money for you. We hope you've enjoyed the session. It's been absolutely amazing. I wish we could have this chat forever. We must actually create a podcast from this because I think it was phenomenal. There's some eats at the back, and let's network and let's have the conversations. The bankers are here, as I said. If you do have a kidney to spare or a dog, you can give it across. Thank you very much.